See if everything joins up. Okay, I think we are on YouTube and Twitch and Discord. Okay, so what I wanted to do today was to actually do some 3D. And I know once upon a time, a couple of people, when they were talking about what the type of things that they wanted to do in their game, ultimately they were like, yeah, it'd be great to do some 3D. So here's today. We're going to do some 3D. Now, there is not a 3D requirement for any of the projects in this class. So this a couple of things in the Animator that we have not really touched before. One being layers, and the other being blend trees. So this is sort of what we're going for. Let's see if I can. So in this example, I am using some assets from the Unity Asset Store. You can get them yourself. You can try it out. They're both free. There's a dog knight, changing character as dog. So it's a basically by Dungeon Mason, and it's a nice little dog knight character that has animations included, which is great. And also from Neutron Cat, we have a simple low poly environment, simple low poly nature pack kit, I think for $20, and you can get all the cute animals as heroic figures. Anyway, all right, so let's jump over to our scene here. Now, this particular scene is actually, I've sort of winged it, and I've created my own little scene using the low poly environment here. And if I press play, you'll see in my scene, this is kind of what we're going to be going for a little bit. I can walk my little character around, and I've got some things, and he can jump, and he can stand on these stumps, and he can also do things like jump over these railings, and he can, I think if we, I don't have the duck for him, but he can barely, no, can't get quite through there. So he cannot get through the 8-way there. You can't get it, sort of jump over these things. And let's see, I'm getting a spinning. Let's see, are we okay on Discord? I'm getting kind of a spinning, an odd spinning thing. Let me check with folks on Discord. Let me try that again. Interesting. Well, let me see. Double check my voice and video settings. Sorry for everyone who is watching. Oh, let's see. There is a problem. There we go. There we go. Discord changed some parameters on me. Don't know why, but it did. Okay. So let me recap for those. It's not fine on Twitch. Yep, it's good now. Okay. So quick recap for those who are here. We're going to create this little, talk about what's necessary to create sort of a 3D version of our platformer. And you can see I have this little knight character, and he's wandering around the world, and he can jump onto things, and he can attack with his sword. And a really cool thing is he can attack with his sword while he's running. I'm gonna really, so he attacks without missing a beat with regards to running. Right. So there's a couple of things that are used here. We have a animation, and as part of that animation, we have a blend tree. Now you can also see the camera sort of following him around. And again, for those of you who didn't see it because of the problems with the stream, this is using Dungeon Mason's Dog Night physically based rendering. There's a low poly version and a textured version. I'm using just the low poly version, and some simple low poly nature by Neutron Cat. Also another free, not just inexpensive, but free assets. Now, by default, when you download that, you will get, as part of that, there are some prefab scenes. So, for example, here is, well, we're going to stop the scene. Let's go to demo night, save that scene. So here's the nighttime version of that scene. I haven't done anything related to that one yet, but you can see they have done far more cool things, kind of laid out everything. And there's also a daytime scene. And in the daytime scene, you'll see there is our little dog again. Now, in their daytime scene, I have also platforms. So you'll see now as I run around the game, I can hop up on these things, hopefully. Oops. Yeah, my controls need a little bit of work here. There we go. Oops. What's going on here? I'm looking at the wrong screen. And look over here, hop up on one, hop up on the next, whoop, and try to hop up on that last one. I can't quite reach it. Avoid that. Don't fall in the water. Okay. But I've also created some more. I should do the run. Run over here. And here's some platforms for him to climb into the sky. And there's some tweaking necessary. So, couple of things we're going to talk about in here. I mentioned the animations and the animator things, but also one of the nice things that you are afforded in 3D that we sort of had to do by hand, we now have a much better appreciation for, is that Unity provides a 3D character controller that is sort of pre-baked in the case of a 3D. Well, that's, whoops. Anyway, yes, this is quickly put together. It's lots of fun. You can run through the tent. He does bump into trees and so on. And you'll notice the nice thing is that he will try to, if he hits a tree, he will actually, any of these things, he will kind of go up. He climbs up this thing. And if he's going fast enough, let's try to get him some speed. Oh, that wasn't right. Will actually launch himself here. Nope. There we go. All right, so let's talk about what's going on and maybe even recreate it from scratch. All right. So let's go to a new dog night here. So scenes, and I've got another couple of simple scenes. We'll create yet another one. Create scene, and this would be dog day, pardon the pun, dog day afternoon. And my caps lock was on. But anyway, nothing in the scene at this point. But let's bring something into the scene. We will go into our simple low poly assets, and there are prefabs and models. So you'll see there are lots of models here, which are, I don't know what it was built in, but they are 3D meshes. And there are prefabs, which are meshes with materials applied with, I think some of them do have colliders assigned to them, things you can collide with, like mushrooms, for example, and rocks have colliders associated with them. Like the tent does not have a collider. So if you run into the tent, you can run through the tent. The boat also does not have a collider. Fences do, though, so that's good. Tree stumps also do. So those are some prefabs and models. And within the scene, there's also a low poly terrain, which is also a mesh. Now you can, there is a terrain tool. So why don't we why don't we try this? This will be even cooler. One of the things we can do in our scene here, I'm going to say create empty, and I'm going to put a 3D object on there, and it's going to be a terrain. Okay. So here's the terrain that I'm adding. I'm going to use the material that's already here, maybe. Oh, not Dog Knight's material, but the materials that came with a simple low poly world. And let's look. Let's see this. Tree, plant. Oh, and all kinds of things. Wood, materials, tree, yellow. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and use plant material and say, whoops, let's select that terrain. And material is what gives a 3D mesh or model. It's what gives it its look, its appearance. So sometimes it'll be textures, sometimes it'll be just colors, sometimes it'll do things like, make it shiny or soft or rough or smooth. So there's lots and lots of things you can do. And we'll just try to grab this. Oh, it doesn't want us to use that one. Let's try. Let's see. Materials in our scene. It doesn't seem to like that particular material. Why? Oh, that's the terrain collider. And paint trees, paint detail, terrain settings. Let's try this. And here we go, terrain collider. Nope. Light map. I've never painted a terrain before. That's what my problem is. Wind settings for grass tint. We could do this. Let's make the grass. We'll use the eyedropper. I think we'll do that. Oh, there's a material. Default terrain standard. So we can drag that. There we go. All right. So now we have some green grass terrain. Now we can paint things about the terrain in. So raise and lower terrain. We're going to use, I'm going to use kind of thing in here. And I'm going to do some things to the terrain here. Maybe something bigger than that. I don't know. So you can see I'm sort of painting in stuff for the terrain. Now, where's that main camera here? So let's find our main camera. Oh, it's kind of nearby. Let's move the main camera. Maybe move the main camera to be at 0, 50. Let's see. Why? There we go. 50Z. So now we are somewhere in the world. And let's see. Let's click on that again. Okay. Now, so our camera is there. And I'm going to go and give the terrain a little bit more interesting things. And I'll even use, let's see, this. And maybe make something that's a little more mountainous. Cool. And let's see, I want to subtract here. Let's see if I can, instead of raising it, can I lower it? Nope, that's raising. Undo. Brush size, new brush, built-in brush. Hold and shift. Oh, left click to lower. There we go. Hold shift and left click to lower. Left click. Okay. There we go. I can lower existing terrain, but I can't. Interesting. I guess I can't carve out terrain. Never really carved out terrain. Let's lower that one a little bit. All right. Spending too much time on terrain. But there's our terrain. All right. So we have some terrain and we hit play. Not much of anything happens. Let's bring our character into the scene. Let's do that. So we have our dog knight, and our dog knight, there is a prefab, thankfully, for our dog, our poly art. And we're going to bring him in and we'll just place him there. All right. And we'll hit play. And not too much is going to happen. He's going to be just sort of standing there. And he's sort of animating, actually, right? So the dog has a controller, an Animator controller on it right now at the moment. And you'll see that, why is that? That shouldn't be set up like that. Let's turn that mask down. And walk, run, tree. Why isn't that coming back? Velocity less than 0.01. All right, well, let's get into our dog controller here. Something's slightly odd with him, but we're going to fix him. All right. So, oh, I know why, because he doesn't have a controller yet. So the dog, if you bring in the dog from your asset pack just as is, if you go ahead, it's going to actually have a bunch of animations. You're going to see a whole list like this: attack 01, attack 02, defend, get hit, run forward, backward, and so on and so on. And here, I'm going to get rid of those. So here's just going into his idle, right? His idle animation. He's kind of just sitting there waiting. And I'm going to move him up just a little bit. Okay, so there's the dog. And he's in the scene. And he's idling. And if I press my keys and I'm in the scene, nothing happens. So if I use the joystick and so on, nothing happens. Now, so what we want to use is what I alluded to before, what I mentioned before, this thing called a character controller. Now, we've written our own character controllers from scratch up to now. You know, basically our hero controller, player controller, all those sorts of things. But the nice thing, like I said, is that in the 3D world, and you can use this, you don't have to use this. Some people do it, some people don't. But it's a great way to get started. You can add a component, which is, and maybe you've seen it in there, or you've been wondering about this thing, this character controller. Now, there is no 2D character controller. There's only a 3D character controller. Now, we're going to go ahead and put it on our dog knight here. There it is, our character controller. And if I help, the character controller isn't an input system. It doesn't really control, it doesn't provide motion in and of itself. It just helps with the interaction of that character and the environment. So, which means you can use the character controller for NPCs, for non-player or non-playable characters, as well as the actual character. But in our case, we're going to use it for the character. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the geometry correct. Now, by default, it uses a, well, actually, I'm not sure you can change this. I don't think you can. It uses a capsule collider, and we're going to change the center of the capsule collider to 0.75 and the height to 1.5. And it just happens to be that our dog knight, anything's going to happen. He didn't actually hit the ground. And you'll notice if I do pick the dog and I bring him up and I let go, he does not drop. Okay. In fact, I can push him through, right? He doesn't go popping out. Right? He doesn't have a normal sort of rigid body and a normal, capsule collider on him, it, she, her. I don't know. It's a dog. But to make that happen, to make things work with the character controller, you need to provide some amount of scripting. So you need a component, and I've already created something called a dog controller. And it's very similar to what we've seen in our 2D controllers. We have some speeds, we have a rotational speed, we have a jump speed, and unlike what we normally have, it also has gravity, all right? Because we have to take care of gravity for the dog here. Now, I will go ahead, I'll hit play, and you'll see what happens. Hopefully this will work. I have never tried it with my generated terrain, but I think it will work. There we go. So he fell down, she fell down, and is now on the terrain, more or less. See, it's slightly up, and that may very well be because of this. Yep, All right. So there's a skin around the player controller, right? The character controller, sorry, I should have called it character controller. The character controller is really helping us with the interaction of our character and the environment. That's what it's all about here. So let's change that. I said 0.3, that's what I did. All right. Oh, no, 0.3 is too much. We just sunk our feet into the ground, looks like. Boom, there we go. All right. Now you'll see that I can move my character. Speed really isn't enough. So 45 degrees per second. And my walk and run speed are pretty good. So there, walk around and we kind of turn. And we kind of slide around to the world. Now, one very terrain here, and you'll see the dog will move up the terrain. All right. So the dog can climb terrain to some degree. Well, let's move and try to run up this big hill here. And you'll see that the dog cannot go up the big hill. It can kind of jump up the big hill, but it has a harder time climbing the big hill. Now, why is that? Well, that's because of this limitation here, the slope limit, right? Now, slope limit and step offset, there's an interaction between the two. We're basically defining how much of a slope can the character climb. And when it takes a step as it moves, how much can it move up? So can it step over objects? Basically, this is saying, okay, an object that's about 1 foot tall, 1/3 of a meter, 3/10 of a meter, right? What's that, 30 centimeters? It can walk over. And it can also go up slopes that are no more than 45 degrees. So we're going to do this. We're going to 10 degrees, for example. And we'll try to go up that same slope here. We have a harder time going up even that smaller slope, right? Now, if we change it to 90 degrees, we certainly have no problem. And we could even, let's turn here. I think we can, whoops. There we go. We're looking at the scene view here. Just because I can move the camera there. That the dog will try to go, yeah, there it goes. The dog went up successfully went up that hill. And we'll go back down again. Whoa. So we can adjust the limits on the slope that it can climb, its step offset or step height to get over and across gaps. It has a width of the skin sort of around this pseudo collider that it has on there. And then the minimum distance that it will move in reaction to a move function, right? When it's called and when it's told to move. So the movement is really happening here in the dog controller script. So let's take a look at what that is. And let's see, I'm doing things slightly different here. All right, there we go. All right, not a lot of code in here though. Still, pull that up there. And roll that up. Here, or we'll do this first. There. All right. So one of the things that we did in our last couple of games, or we've been discussing, is this notion of having grounding, right? So when a character touches the ground, it's not allowed to walk or jump or do various things unless it's touching the ground. Sometimes we use things like a circle collider or a circle intersection to see, does that, we cast a circle, or we look for a circle overlap with other colliders at the feet of the character. And that's what's going on here. It's sort of invisible to us. It's done by the controller, and it will just set that value for us. So here in the code, I've got all my publicly available things that I want to modify. And then I have a private reference to my character controller. And the controller, during start, I just get it as I would get any other component, so I can then refer to that and not have to get it each time. And then in update is really where I'm interacting with that controller and the animator, right? The animator is what's sort of giving us all the cool animations, and the controller is what, of course, is doing the motion. All right, almost all of the motion. So one thing that the character controller doesn't do, it doesn't handle rotation, right? It really just moves in the world, left, right, up, down. So it may do something with rotation. Well, it reacts to being rotated, but you rotate it explicitly here. I don't think there's a controller.rotate. There's only controller.move. All right. So I handle rotation just as I would my normal sort of tank rotation, where I'm using the horizontal axis. So that's the A and D keys, or the joystick controller. And I rotate the object I'm on. And here I'm sort of violating. You'll notice I'm not interacting. I'm not putting forces. I'm not adding torque and so on. If you are using the character controller, chances are you're using scripted motion and not physics-based motion, which is kind of the trade-off here. You have to handle your own physics quite a bit. So if the player is going to get pushed back by something, you may very well have to deal with that yourself, right? So that's the tricky part, right? So in this case, let's go through. So we're rotating the object according to the horizontal axis. So we do a rotation. And then we check, and probably could do this rotation inside here as well. I'm letting it rotate while it's not grounded. So in the air, it can kind of twist. That's what I decided. Okay, it's going to be able to twist in the air. But it checks. If it's grounded, then I figure out the direction that I want to move. First, I grab the direction according to the vertical axis. And in the case of using keys, this is really going to be just 1. It's going to be 0, 0, 1 in the Z direction, right? Z is into the screen. Now remember, we're dealing with 3 directions. Vector 3 is from here, and X, Y. So X is left to right, Y is up and down, and Z is in and out of the screen, or forward and backward. We've never really dealt with forward and backward before. We had up, down, left, right. Now we have forward and backward in terms of the Z here. All right. So we get the direction, and we convert that to be in the local space, or excuse me, the world space of the game, as opposed to being the local space, right? So this, we start saying, okay, this would be the local movement, how much we want to move forward, right? Z, like I said, is always, Z is forward as far as this character is concerned. Now if I go over, let's see, down blue, the blue axis is our Z. You'll see here Z, so that's forward, backward, and X is left and right. Oh, wow. And Y is up and down. There we go. And I was worried I crashed there. That would have been terrible. All right, we'll jump back to Visual Studio though. All right. So we convert that direction, that forward direction, to a direction in the world space. Okay. And then I want to multiply speed so that we're just not dealing with a unit vector. We're multiplying it by the walking speed. And then we have a chance to even multiply it further by the running speed, right? So so run is actually a multiplier. And if the player holds down the shift key, the left shift key, the move direction will get further multiplied. So I think I did what by default, walk speed is 2, and then run speed is multiplying that by 3. So it winds up being 2 here, and then up to 6 here, sort of thing. All right, so that becomes our move direction. As far as that normal motion, forward and backward. Now, additionally, we're also going to explicitly take care of jumping up and down. So if input get button jump, we're going to modify our Y. So we're going to say, okay, we want to move in the Y direction. We want to move in the Y direction up according to jump speed, right? So we're always figuring out, how much we want to move the character controller, right? So we figured out now we have a direction we want to go in, and we are going to explicitly handle gravity here ourselves. So we're going to subtract off a certain amount from the direction we want to move according to gravity, right? So usually this will always be pointing down, and it'll always be, so we're going to try to move in this negative Y direction. If nothing else, it's always going to be moving in the negative Y direction unless there's a jump, right? And then finally, that's interesting. Let's see. It's got double kind of pruned or scaled, effectively scaled the Y direction twice here. So it's gonna be really, really small, but it works out. All right. So then we tell the controller to actually move the character, right? So we did the rotation here explicitly, but we haven't done anything to actually move the character yet. And the controller will handle the actual movement, right? So now if we go to Unity, you'll see, that rotate, excuse me, and move forward and backward. And if I press the space bar, I do jump. And additionally, if I hold down the mouse key, I do this kind of attack move here. All right. Now, the way that the attack move is handled is up here. We just say, okay, if there is a button, and actually, I think this first part is going to now be sort of redundant. I think this is redundant now. So let's go back here and restart. Okay, you'll see the character is attacking, right? All right, so how's that happening? Let's go back to Visual Studio. So Visual Studio, now some of this is going to look new. Some of it's definitely going to look new. So this is handling all of our animations here, all right? So the Animator is, we have something called a layer weight. So animations can have multiple layers in them. So far, your animations have probably just had a single layer, right? Your left, right, up, down, all are controlled by some sort of velocity, some kind of straightforward condition. But you can have multiple layers, and then you set a weight for each layer, and it will allow for blending or overriding or overlapping, adding layers, the effective layers on top of one another. So what this line here is saying, okay, set the layer weight of layer 1 according to whether or not the fire button is pressed. If the fire button is pressed, set that weight to 1. And we could say 1.0f if we wanted, just to be explicit. And if the fire button is not pressed, we set it to 0. Okay, so the layer weight of layer 1 is set to 1 if fire is pressed. Okay. And additionally, we have a animator parameter called attacking. And we say, okay, set bool attacking according to whether or not that button is pressed. So attacking effectively will be set to true if the fire button is pressed, or false if the fire button is not pressed. Right? So that's what handles our attacking. Right? We set the layer weight to 1, the layer weight of layer 1 to 1, which is going to be the part that gives us our attacking animation. And we tell it, yes, to go into the attacking state. We also have a parameter, an animator parameter called velocity, which is going to just be, we're just going to send it in how fast the controller thinks we're moving. All right, so the controller does have a velocity, just like a rigid body has a velocity. All right. So we're going to get that velocity and get the magnitude of that velocity and tell the animator about that. All right. So now, things that are going on. I think we've gone through all the code more or less, right? That we had the rotation is the actual motion in the second part and handling the animation up here in the first part. Okay, just go back to Unity and make sure it's running correctly. And we'll probably be spending the rest of the time in Unity to see how this works. Attack works, but my velocity isn't doing anything. I'm just in that idle state there. Let's take a look at our animator. Here's our animator. And the base layer for our animator, we have all these potential animations to choose from, but we're really just interested in this walk forward and run forward. And there are actually 2 different animations for walking and running. So if you look like at his tail while he's moving, let's see here. I think it moves. So this is just, oh, well, it's not doing either of these yet. So we have these two animations that we want to control based on walking and running. It was really just walk up, walk down, walk left, walk right. So there wasn't a degree to which you were walking, right? So if there is something where you want to be blending animations, or you're deciding to what degree one animation versus another animation is used, there is a structure called a blend tree, and you create a state from new blend tree. All right, and I'll recreate this one. We'll put this one up here. We're going to create this blend tree, and we'll call this walk adjust, walk run, and I just won't call it tree. Walk run. All right. And let's decide what's going to be in that walk run. All right. So we're going to go into walk run. We're going to make a transition, go into walk run if what? If velocity is greater than 0. And we're going to leave the walk run state and go back to idle if velocity is less than 0.1. So there's a span there. We could say greater than 0.1, less than 0.1. A little bit of a gap. That's okay. All right. So what should be happening in this walk run state? So open it up and you see in there, there's this blend tree. And right now it is a one-dimensional blend. And the blend is controlled by velocity, but it has no motions associated with it. So let's add some motions. So we're going to say add a motion field, and I'm going to put I'm going to add another motion field, add another motion field. So now there's 2, and you'll see that it has this sort of blending potential here, like halfway through, and you'll see down here, velocity going up and down is going to move me through this blending state where I am at 1 of this first one and 0 of the second until I go through the other side, in which case I have 1 of the first and 0 of the second, or is it 1 of the second, 0 of the first, right? So there's that change there according to velocity. Now, maybe what I really want to do is I want that to be within 6 over here. So let's say they're going to be from 0 to 6. Remember, I multiplied by 2 and then multiplied by 3. So it could be anywhere between 0 and 6. Now, let's give some motions. So the first one, we will go to Dog Night Animations, and we had walk forward. Right, there's our walk forward battle. And then the second one, we'll use our run forward battle. Okay. And we will, I think we can just leave that as is. And let's see now if that's gonna, all right. So you'll see over here, as we walk, it's going from 0 to 2. And then once it hits 6, it goes into our run, right? So as we're walking, we get up to here, 0 to 2. So we are still in the walking state. But if we hold down the shift key, we go all the way to 6 and we get into that running state. And it's kind of fun because we walk backwards and it totally works correctly, sort of. All right, now we can mess with the transition times and so on, that sort of thing. And this is one particular type of blend tree. You know, this is a 1D blend tree, right? Because we're just dealing with velocity. Now, you can also do things like have directional blend trees. So for example, you could put specific points in here. And let's see if I can move these around. I think I have to do this outside of play. All right. You'll see now I can move these sort of states around. Let's see, this is my walk. And this is a bad, normally this is much more useful if I have more than 2 states. Now you'll see I'm effectively going back and forth between these two by designing sort of a field here. Now, if I had more motion states where at a left, right, and up and a down, I could say, well, okay, depending on how close to one or the other, and I can do limits and things. In this case, let's go with that's linear velocity and velocity, which is why I'm moving along that straight line there. Normally, I need an X and a Y. I need 2 dimensions if I want to use a 2-dimensional direction. So in this case, we're just going to use 1, and we're going to get rid of these extra ridiculous things, and we're going to fix this back to 6. Get that working again. And we have our motion, hopefully doing the right thing. And walk back towards us. And there's a jump. And you'll notice it's actually a blended motion. It smoothly transitions between the run and the walk. Like here, it's going to be 50% of one, 50% of the other, right? So we're actually blending the animations together, which is why it's called a blend tree. A very, very powerful tool there. Now, you're also, what we haven't talked about is, well, this is kind of cool. If the character is running or walking, or let's get this again, and it attacks, you'll notice that it's able to sort of run and attack at the same time. And the way it does that is it's actually doing a additive operation between these two layers, right? So we've added parameters before, but you can also add layer we're looking at right now. And we have this attack layer, right? And the attack layer is just another state machine. And all it goes between is this idle, battle, and attack. Sorry, my door is opening for some strange reason, making a strange noise. There's my cat coming in. So this one is quite simply goes between attacking and idling. And what we're doing is we are adjusting the weight of each layer, right? And you can set type of mode, you can override, you can add, right? So in this case, we're going to do an additive blend. And at 1, it's going to be adding this animation to the other animation. So just like setting the parameter, so if we set attacking to true, it goes into the attacking animation. And then if we adjust that weight, we will have it go, it will add in this attack layer to the base layer. So that's how we get that additional layer in there. So you'll see both layers are really running at the same time, but none of this layer is being added in. So we could even do this. Watch this, ready? In the attack layer, we could say, make transition to here, and we could even make this the default state of this layer and get rid of these. And you'll see it won't go into the attack until I actually click. So it's playing, but this layer is not being added in at all. It runs in the distance. To make it a little bit easier to follow, I'm going to take my main camera and I'm going to put that in the dog's tree. So now as the dog runs around, so that's the basics of creating or using a character controller, using the animator and using animator layers to kind of get things a little more interesting and or easily into the sort of the 3D world. Now let's go ahead. I'm going to place a few objects in the scene just to make it somewhat more interesting. So here we are, and right away, what I'll do is I'll grab, I think I should have some fences, and use the prefab so that because they are, and this big rock, big chunk. And the fences go. Let's see, Alt, no. We'll duplicate it and we will rotate it. And Y is the direction I want to rotate in. So I can create sort of a little corral here if I want. And what else should we do? We should put 3 perhaps. And we'll go into our game. And up on top of that tree stump. So we get a running start. Jump over the running start here. Right. And jump. Oh, I jumped right over the stump. There we go. We're on the stump. Okay. So everything we've learned obviously already applies. Our scripting methods, our collisions, we're really just starting to use objects that are 3-dimensional, use the physics that are 3-dimensional. Certainly you can do, using things like joints and effectors and all sorts of things in 3-dimensional sense now. So even let's, a cool thing, imagine, let's see, we have clouds in the sky. Let's see. I was going to, I'm going to have a rock or something that would drop down. Here's a rock. And if we put the rock, oops. Oh, these are all going to go away. All right. Shouldn't have done that. I'll go ahead and put my rock in the scene here. Now, if I want that rock to, now that is a rigid body rock with a mesh collider on it. And in the world, it's going to, something fell. Rock 1. Use gravity is kinematic. Use gravity is set. Rock material is set. Why isn't my rock moving? Rock. Mesh body mass, mesh collider. If I don't cook it, wait, something is not set right. Well, here's what I'm gonna do. Oh, did I parent that to something? No, didn't do that. I'm gonna do this really simply. I'm going to add a 3D object is going to be a sphere. Quickly add this to the scene. And let's see if I can make this drop. So we'll add a component, rigid body, texture constraints, no, interpolate. If we walk over to this, what sort of interactions can we have with this object? It has a collider. We can collide with it. We can jump on top of it. But we are having a harder time pushing it. Can we push it? we are forcing it to do something. Just jumping on top of it, we are giving it some motion. So the interaction, it is a trade-off. There is certainly a trade-off to using the character controller in that it's not quite a one-to-one physics compatible. I mean, it's compatible, but you have to work things out. So if I wanted, for example, this attack to do something to the ball, I should really actually a force effector, perhaps, or something that could be done that I would use to kind of push it forward. Let's see. If I add, I can't really change my mass and so on. So that's the tricky part. Starting to get into, you know, with 3D, it's easy to get past the initial, you know, okay, we can move things around, we can place objects, very, very similar to what we did in 2D. Our character controller works pretty well. Our basic character motion, pretty easy to deal with. Our collisions, pretty easy to deal with. But then as we start the interactions with things in 3D physics, then it can get a little trickier. So I advise you to definitely play with the 3D engine, play with the project, because I do expect to see, you know, especially as you get into things like joints and hinge effectors and hinges and effectors and so on, that's going to be certainly trickier than the basic things. But I did want to cover that so that people can kind of see, you know, get the idea, get a feel for the basic interactions that you can do here. So, let me know if you have any questions, and I'm happy to try to you know, 3D isn't, the 3D inside of Unity isn't normally the place I spend most of my time. I'm usually a bigger fan of the 2D game piece, but I'm changing that, and I'm happy to explore it if anyone else has some interest in that. Thanks. All right, I'm going to end for today because it is 2:30 and we've gone for a whole hour, and I'm going to leave some time for people to ask questions about their project, and we'll take it from there. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Have a great day, and we'll see you on Thursday. I am mulling the idea around of trying to, because I know everyone has been, you know, this is a asynchronous class, and in-person attendance has been much lower lately. I was hoping to be able to at least touch base, whether it be via a direct conversation, direct message, perhaps even do one-on-one meetings next week, since next week is our last week. So to have a little bit of like interaction to kind of wrap up the summer session. So if you're here, expect me to be getting more in contact with everybody on different things. All right, take care. Have a great rest of your day. See you on Thursday.